Personally, previously as a sommelier and now as somebody that represents a winery, have been constantly associated with weird choices in wine. And I never made a conscious choice to go out and look for things that are out of norm or considered out of norm. What led me always towards something is how it tasted. And this is one of the most beautiful things about wine, that no matter what you've been told you should be tasting, no matter what you've been told is good or is bad, there is only one judge, and that is the best judge whether something is worth it, and that is your own palate, your own taste buds. Now, it is very unusual to talk about wine in such a prescriptive way. Now, when I first started working as a sommelier, coming from where I come from, I'm from Bulgaria in Eastern Europe. There you just drink. You just drink and taste. It's not like, there's Merlot, there's Pinot Noir, it should taste like this. Pretty much what you do is you taste something, if you like it, you drink it. So I came here and started going through wine schooling, and then properly made a choice to get out of it, because wine schooling is nothing but reading books and tasting really, really, really not so good wines, bad wines. And nobody gives you the understanding or the context of how to really experience things. So what I started doing is going to wineries, just because I wanted to understand, now I think this is, golden delicious apple, the smell, or Granny Smith, but why is it there? And before you know it, you learn a lot when you go and pick grapes from the vine, and I can assure you that there are many, many, many specialists, quote unquote, that work in the industry, that prescribe what you should be drinking, that I've never even tasted a raw grape. So it's that there's a lot of disconnect. However, when you go and spend time in the cellars with the people that make it, you learn things about the process. That process informs your personal decisions thereafter. And one very fine day, I stumbled on a winery called Provenance that nobody knew about. It's very hard to find because there is no sign, which is already weird. If you've been to Niagara, there's signs everywhere. There's, tasting bars. There's gazillion little things in the stores that people put in. Provenance had none of that. It just had a gravel driveway. It's just a gravel driveway with no sign and a couple of buildings, and you had to find which one to go to, and you open the door and it's just tanks and barrels. And I tasted the wines, and it's in that moment, I know it sounds, oh my God, one of those fairy tale moments, but it is completely true. It's 3 little sips of weird wine completely changed my life. It was, after that moment, there was no going back to anything else. So, what I did, and I'll tell you the story of Pearl Morissette after and why things are considered weird by many of our peers, put in the definition of weird, because it's so interesting to see. I personally, English is my second language obviously, but I've always thought there is a little bit of a negative connotation, or not necessarily a positive connotation, and the dictionary said that as a verb, this means to induce a sense of disbelief or alienation in someone. However, as an adjective, also it says that it suggests something that is supernatural, uncanny, strange, unusual. And the funniest thing is that for whatever reason, as a culture, we've chosen to concentrate on the alienating aspect of weird. When you're seeing something that's not necessarily, that doesn't fit your expectations, that it's not by a norm, when you say that's weird, there is, I don't understand it, but I'm not necessarily also that curious to understand that. Now, in that sense, there's a dichotomy in the meaning, and I personally always approached things that are unusual with curiosity. My biggest fault is that I'm extremely, extremely curious. So those 3 little steps of weird wine, or what, as I said, is called atypical wine in winemaking, just made me rethink everything that I've been taught and thought I knew about wine. So within that dichotomy, there's a question that I want to pose, which is what is weird and what is visionary? Because there's definitely a lot of things in the world that in the time of their making are considered weird. However, later on, with the benefit of hindsight, with the results of exploration, when the process is gone through all the way, looking back, you'd call them visionary. Now, I don't know, I'm sure, or I hope everybody drinks wine. And yeah, you definitely should if you don't. And only great stuff. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a context in terms of winemaking, how people think, in order to be able to portray what informs the decisions of winemakers. Now, when we talk about winemaking, broadly speaking, there are 2 different veins with which people approach it. They're generally called New World and Old World, or as I'd like to call them, because those New World and Old World are already getting, not to be too exact as descriptives. There's Interventionist winemaking, which is most of modern day winemaking, and there is something that people these days call natural winemaking. I prefer to call it traditional winemaking. Why that is because wine in itself is a natural beverage. So it's a little bit redundant to call about natural winemaking. However, because we live in the places that we do in the New World, because we live at a time where people choose to use science rather than allow for a natural process to take the place, natural winemaking is all of a sudden re-emerging or emerging as a trend, while it's actually the oldest way of making wine. So in conventional winemaking, what you do is you choose, obviously, a plot of land to work with, and based on the environment or the winery itself in terms of how influenceable it is by market trends, you design the face or the character of the wine. And not a lot of people know that because nobody chooses to explain it. Everybody would rather, let people believe that, you go in the vineyard and frolic around and, there is sunlight bouncing off the winemaker's hair, and then you have wine and it's such a natural beverage. But not really. So what happens is that in interventionist winemaking, apart from grapes, which is one of the ingredients that should be in the wine, you have over 200 things that you're allowed to put in. They're not in any way, shape, or form things that are gonna kill you or make you sick. They're all approved by Health Canada. However, they're tools in your tool belt of winemaking with which you can design the wine. And they include from colors, sugars, acids, all sorts of fining agents, all sorts of artificial texture builders. The world is your oyster. You don't have to make wine from a certain place. You can make wine from that place that tastes just like wine from 1,000 miles away. Now, there's a different way of looking at wine as well, which is, as you can probably guess, the way that's been chosen in Pearl Morissette. Now, this way is informed by just the vision of what winemaking is. And the winemaker not as a creator of a wine, but him as being an intermediary, and I know that also sounds very fairy tale-ish, but it's definitely true. An intermediary between a plant, the nature that surrounds us, and guiding this agricultural product, because wine essentially, when you strip all the white noise around it, the branding, the big, the heavy bottles, it's an agricultural product. That's all there is to wine. So when you make wine in this way, you take what you've been given from a particular season, and you concentrate on having an intelligent response, and hopefully year after year making that response more and more intelligent towards the environment that surrounds you. What you work for is the inherent quality of that beverage, which we personally look for texture, balance, all these things that make something delicious. You never design the outside of the wine. Those flavors are up to the site, the vineyard that it comes from, the growing season. I can tell you that this year has been extremely, extremely dry, meaning that the vintages of 2016, when they come around, will be wines of power and concentration. You never work for that concentration. You never work to put in that concentration in the wine if it's not already given to you. However, again, this is in stark contrast between with the other way of winemaking, which if the market says that big concentrated wine are what matters, this is what the winemakers want to do, because that's what the market says. It's not that, well, it kind of is. I was just going to say, it's not like we don't care what the market says, but it kind of is. We don't, because for us, the wine aspect, the most important aspect of our winemaking is being expressive of what surrounds us. So why I'm telling you all of this is because Pearl Morissette, much like me when I was just a sommelier, quickly developed a reputation for producing things that are atypical, strange, that do not fit within the norm of what is expected from this area. And on top of all of that, we're considered rebellious because we stood up and said, why is that weird? Now, if you go, there's one of our most famous or infamous stories is the story of a wine called Black Bull. So it's a Riesling, and if you're at all familiar with Niagara or you've been around, you know that most of the wines there that are made out of the Riesling grape have sweetness in them. Ours, when you allow the natural process to take its course, has always fermented to complete dryness, meaning with 0 grams of sugar in it. Now, there's already somehow emerged, something has emerged in a very young industry like Niagara that is a stylistic vision of what Niagara Riesling should be, which is a wine that smells like a salad of tropical fruit, has a lot of acidity in it, and then finishes with sweetness at the back. Our Riesling is the exact opposite of that. It doesn't really smell like tropical fruit. To me, it smells like, flowers and grass, whatever you want to call it. It's got complete dryness at the back and beautiful, what I think, beautiful texture to its acidity. Now, in order for anyone to be able to sell wines in the province of Ontario, you can choose to go through a VQA. It's a regulatory board, and it's called for Vineyards Quality Assurance, which is a regulatory board that's in place to assure that the quality of what is being sold is on point, and that the other aspect, that the wines taste like the way they should be tasting. Now, we hold the pretty interesting position of being the winery that's gotten most wines refused that regulatory approval. Never for quality. That's never been an issue because you pass a provenance test, meaning 100% grapes. Ours are not like from our own vineyards and from Ontario. You pass a lab test that assures that whatever's in the wine is not going to kill anyone, which with us is just grapes and a little bit of sulfur, as opposed to grapes and another 200 things. And then you pass a tasting panel that is there to make sure that you fit within a certain norm. The whole explanation behind it is that if you don't fit within that norm, people won't understand it. And when people go and look for Niagara Riesling, they're looking for that particular thing. So our wines are weird. They're not like that at all. Now, and that would be all cool because we wouldn't care about it if it also didn't come with, there's extra tax when you don't have a VQA approval that you need to pay, which obviously is not a good thing. Now, when that happened, the first time we were refused VQA, one wine was refused 4 separate times. We failed it 4 times, to the point where after the 4th time, when the winemaker went and said like, well, what's the next step? He said, well, there's no next step. Like, you failed it all, it's like, that's it. You're never, getting it. So he went and said to his partner that this is what's happened. We're not given the VQA, so we can just go ahead and sell the wine as it is. However, this comes with 30% more taxation, which is not a good thing. And his partner said, well, because he comes from a completely different kind of business, and said, you've been blackballed. So Francois himself is an ESL, is English as a second language person just like me, and said, what is this to be, what does that mean, to be blackballed? So his partner explained it, and because we are who we are, that's what we call the wine. So it's called Black Ball right now, every single year since it has been called that, even when one year in 2013 somehow it miraculously passed VQA, we still called it Black Ball. And promptly thereafter we failed it, right after the next year. Now, and apart from that, there's a little, like the VQA label, normally it's like just a little square in the back that says VQA on it. Instead of that, we have one big black ball at the back with a star, and every single wine that fails VQA for us, that is what it gets. Now, I loved the wines straight from the get-go. Where I worked at the moment when I first encountered Pearl Morissette was a little wine bar in Leslieville called Scotty, and we swiftly became Pearl Morissette's biggest customer, only because for me it was not so much joining in with the rebellious attitude, but the wines were the best that I've ever tasted from this area. As a sommelier professionally, my palate always tends to go towards more traditional styles of winemaking from around the world, because that winemaking is not weird anywhere else. It's just the way things have been done for many, many, many centuries. But I had absolutely no idea that something so extraordinary and so, in a sense, classic exists right here in Ontario. Now, 2 years later, I was right in there, talking about Pro Morissette and working for Pro Morissette, because I embraced fully that weirdness. Why? Because for me, because I did leave school, did not have too much baggage in my head about what wine is supposed to taste like. Why does wine need to fit a norm? What always drove me, it's what drives people on production site, which is how to make the best possible beverage out of what we're given. Now, everybody tries to do their best, right? Conventional interventionist winemakers are not out there trying to make shitty wines. This is the process and the norm that they believe in. We, on the other hand, believe something completely different. So what is weird to many, to me, was visionary. The choice is always yours within this dichotomy. Which kinds of processes do you personally agree with? So the process is what drives my ethics in terms of, am I gonna be part of something that makes wines in such and such and such a way? Or am I gonna be part of something that makes wine in a completely different way? And again, with wine, the best possible thing is, just as with food, just as everything you can actually experience on a physiological level, you know quality, your taste buds recognize quality once you stop thinking about what you should be tasting, and once you stop thinking about whether you should be liking something or not, because somebody said so. Now, within the sense, again, going back to the weird and visionary dichotomy, it is very interesting to think about how and what is ever decided. Who decides what is quality, what is actually weird, and what is visionary? And I took one quote right here, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the Impressionist stories and the movement of Impressionist art. How at first it was considered pretty strange. Probably they didn't have the word weird at that point. But not only that, people were completely destroying it. And there is a quote by Albert Wolff, who was an art critic at the time, and this is what he went on record saying after the second Impressionist exhibition. Try to make Monsieur Pissarro understand that trees are not violet, that the sky is not the color of fresh butter, and that no sensible human being could countenance such aberrations. Try to explain to Monsieur Renoir that a woman's torso is not a mass of decomposing flesh with those purplish green stains. And it still makes me laugh so hard, because that was the official stand of people. That was the accepted way of perceiving what was being put out there. At the birth of the new movement of art, now with all these years having passed by, we consider classic, that was what people were saying at the time and for a few years after. So what is it going to be now? It's like, that's I always, at the end of the day, we choose whether to embrace the weirdness, the strangeness of something or not. My choice has always been to go and explore and see what informs that weirdness. Are those processes something that is exploratory in nature, that is a new way of thinking, that is referring to something old and traditional in new circumstances? Like, for example, with wine, traditional kind of winemaking happening in a very new wine region, which is Niagara. What is it that gives, who is the decider of the quality or the future classicism of something? And there's obviously no clear answer to that, but the most important thing for me has always been to embrace the weirdness, to embrace our inner black box, so to speak, to keep a curious, an open mind, to ask the questions, to ask why are these decisions of expression being made in whatever area it is that you work with or I work with. Like for me, it's just wine, so that's why I constantly refer to it. And choose whether it'll be something that, not whether it'll be something that'll ever speak to us, but whether we respect a process that can potentially lead to breaking new ground. Because funnily enough, those wines that are now, slowly coming into acceptance into the world of Ontario, the Pearl Morrison wines, have been poured internationally all over Europe and as of recently into the United States in 3 Michelin star restaurants. Because people there don't think they're weird. People there are completely fascinated by the fact that from a new wine region like Canada, which for them is not known and not explored, and mostly a joke, because everybody's very, it's like with wine, my wine is always better than your wine, and where the hell is Canada, and they have grapes there. They recognize the quality of something. They take a swirl and take a sip and see those are new flavors. Those are things that we've never experienced before, but they do have a mark of something that is true, that is real. And from then on, the mind opens up.